I don't believe that Councilmember Sundberg is going to be able to join this morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jason, checking in on my audio. How do I sound?
Gotcha, Chief Oates. Thank you. Let me pull up the agenda here and we'll see what other presenters we have on and get their audio checked early as well. Just in case there's any questions, I guess we've got Chief Jewell, Matthew Wasserberger, and Tina all on consent. If you all want to do a quick audio check in case we've got questions.
Sure. Testing. This is Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew.
Right.
And like I said, Tina or Bess. I guess Bess might be covering for Tina. I know Tina's out of the office.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I'm here if you need me, just for audio check.
Thank you. And then I see Councilmember Jurinsky. So when you're ready, ma'am, we'll go ahead and get an audio check.
I'm here.
Thank you, ma'am. And then Commander Wright, you want to get an audio check on you?
Good morning.
Thank you. All right. Okay.
Can I go ahead and are we ready, Jason?
I think I was gonna say, I think with that, I think we're ready to go. So I know you've got a quorum and we'll get going.
Okay, so I just we'll jump into it. So for first up is approval of minutes. Any questions or issues with the minutes?
I have none.
Seeing none, we'll go consent items 3A through 3C. Any questions or okay to move forward with that?
We're okay.
Okay. General business 4A, public safety action update. This is over to you, Jason.
Thank you, sir. So this is, as we discussed last month, we put together what we think is kind of a standard format that we're going to provide monthly to the committee with both kind of metrics, sort of, in terms of some numbers each month, but then also as sort of a narrative on things that maybe don't lend themselves to monthly metrics. And so we've got that report. We have the different staff that have provided those. And so didn't know how you wanted to handle that, sir. We can go through each of them or we can kind of just open it up for questions.
Yeah, I think let's just tick through them and allow them to.
So then with that, start with the first section in terms of making sure we're fully staffed. One of the things we did provide in there was where we're at on each of our specialty operations. So you see all of the different units within the Special Operations Command in terms of both what they're authorized and then if they have any vacancies. I'll note for the committee, obviously, that we've got our gang, our grit, SWAT, K9, and CRT units fully staffed. We have no vacancies on those. So I want to make sure you see that. And then as we've talked about, looking forward a little bit in terms of what our what's in the academy, what we expect to be coming through, and looking at that. And then we also have some highlights on the training that our officers are going through and coming up. So any questions on that front?
No.
Okay. Then second part of that is being data driven. And so we really want to provide some metrics in terms of where our numbers are at. This has been a really big focus of Chief Oates since he's gotten here. He really wants to make sure that we are fully staffed and capable, particularly as it relates to our crime analysts and making sure that we are being data driven. So he's put a lot of focus on that in just his first few weeks on the ground. And so you can kind of see provided the numbers as it relates to violent crime. So murders, shootings, robberies, and motor vehicle thefts. You can see all of those numbers and really getting to a 4-week trend. And so that's something that, again, Chief Oates really wants to focus on, is not necessarily what was it compared to last year, which is interesting, but really what are we doing to impact those numbers in the last 4 weeks, so in the immediate. And that's something he's talked to me about. I know he's working with his team to focus on how do we do that. Chief Oates, I don't want to talk for you. I'll let you kind of talk about your philosophy in terms of how you like to use the data.
And thank you, Jason. And I'm in the process of trying to rebuild what I think is the best possible sort of crime fighting infrastructure within the department, and getting back to effective crime fighting meetings. And part of that is data analysis. And as Jason said, it's my firm belief that you can only ask cops and police leaders to act on trends. And the best way to study trends is to study the most recent 4 weeks against the prior 4 weeks. And we're going to be in the weeks ahead redesigning our crime fighting meetings around that, and around the most significant and violent crimes, non-fatal shootings, robberies, car thefts have a significant impact on other crime in the city. And along with our plans to develop a new violent crime response team, focused on areas where that kind of activity is taking place, times and days of the week, we hope to, in time, begin to have an impact. My goal is, once we have those meetings operating in a manner that is effective, would be to invite members of the Public Safety Committee to attend the meetings and see how we do business. But we're still a couple weeks out from sort of redesigning that process. So we look forward to showcasing that for you in the future.
Thanks, Chief Oates. And I guess our message to you would be both on these first two items, both in terms of making sure that you have fully staffed department, and then with regards to this improving the data and the way that you guys approach utilizing the data. Just always feel free to let us know if there's any ways which we can be helpful to you in making the changes that you believe are necessary to get the department on a strong crime fighting foot.
Yeah, and I'm also trying to redesign a one-page cover sheet snapshot of the city and the crimes and that we are most interested in a more user-friendly format. I hope to unveil that for you shortly. Been working with our crime analysts on that, and we would produce it week to week, and we can all look at it and have a snapshot that's, I think, better than some of the material we've given you this week. So just need a little bit more time on that.
Great. Thanks, sir.
Final thing I'll touch on is the department did, I think, a very nice job of capturing some operations, as we've talked to you all about. We've made a strong push on street racing to address that. So they provided a summary of those operations for the month of May. We made 2 physical arrests, issued 25 tickets, towed 3 vehicles, and then issued 2 abatement notices. Obviously, we're having a large presence out there. Councilmember Jurinsky brought to our attention that those efforts may be bearing fruit, and it may be pushing people to folks that places that we otherwise haven't been looking. So thanks to her for bringing that new location to our attention. We're going to add that to our sort of watch list as it relates to street racers, and we're going to continue to make this an unwelcoming place for their activities. With that too, the other thing I'll highlight for you is our traffic unit did a great job. We are trying to have regular traffic port operations. We do those out on Hamden and look at heavy truck traffic and really pulling folks over and making sure that our truckers are following all of the appropriate requirements. And you'll see that there that this is a huge safety issue. So, in that operation, they took 21 rigs out of service for violations. They found over 143 safety violations as part of that. So we have, some of these trucks are out there on our roadways presenting a danger to the traveling public. So we think this is an important operation, again, being proactive, making sure that we're going out to address these things. So that's something that we hear pretty regularly, particularly from those neighborhoods out along that area. That there's, because of the dump and because of some other things, there's a lot of truck traffic. So we want to make sure that we are, making sure those folks are safe when they're traveling on our roadways. So we've done that. And then finally, and probably most importantly is in April, this is a little bit ago, but wanted to bring this to your attention. Our gang unit, grit unit, others did a great job on an operation out Colfax and Beeler. It was over about a 2-week period, resulted in 8 arrests, 7 guns being taken off the street, sizable amount of drugs, also some prostitution arrests, and then a controlled purchase attempt. So again, trying to be proactive and get dangerous folks off of our streets.
Councilmember Zvonek.
Yep, go ahead.
Jason, can I just ask, with the prostitution arrests, were any of those minors?
I don't believe so. I don't know if one of the chief, if someone on your staff could address that specifically. I don't believe so, but I don't know that for sure. And if we don't have anybody on, we'll get back to you, ma'am.
Yeah, anybody can get back to me.
The answer, if I could, we don't arrest minors for prostitution. Those folks are victims, so there are no minors there
Thank you.
in that data.
Any
And
other?
Chad, I saw you jump in. Anything to add on that one that I missed? I know that was a very successful operation.
I was about ready to say the exact same thing as the chief said.
Anything else? Other questions or anything to add to this? Okay.
Okay, going into the third section in terms of youth violence, provided you again a very high level overview of the strategies, and in terms of our youth violence, we have Christina Amperan on, got that update from her, and can answer any questions. Obviously, there's been a few items at council recently for discussion as that strategy and funding continues to develop. On the fourth item, part of the resolution again addressed our crisis response team and our ability to respond to mental health calls. So you see the metrics in there for the calls for service for our crisis response team. So you've got that in there, and then you've also got some additional details in terms of things we're doing to make sure that that unit stays fully staffed and operational. So we've got Commander Lanigan and Courtney Tassin on if you have any questions about that.
Any questions on that topic? Okay.
Okay, and then finally, on homelessness and in terms of how that's working, you kind of see that we have the numbers in there in terms of the number of notifications we received in May was 328. The number of abatements we conducted, which was 21. 13 of those were CDOT related, and then you can kind of see really detailed in terms of the addresses of where those were at. Also included some early totals in terms of what we think those costs were associated with those abatements. And then obviously, as we've told you in the past, we're continuing to work with CDOT. So I think we have Jessica Prosser and her team on if there's any questions on our homeless efforts.
Any questions for Jessica or Jason?
I have one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Have we started putting in for the reimbursements from CDOT for the 225 cleanups we've been doing? Have we already started putting in for those?
Councilmember Jurinsky, this is Jessica. We have not yet. We are awaiting an updated IGA with CDOT. I had communication from them on Friday. They were sending it over for signature. So once we have that, then we will be submitting on a monthly basis. CDOT has actually performed some of those this past month that's been going on. So we're still working with them, but we've had some better coordination. They're coming to our weekly meetings now. We've got direct access to staffing there. So we are able to coordinate better.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica.
All right, so that's all 5 sections of the resolution. I'd like to take a quick second to thank Reagan Pena for taking the lead on putting all this information together. She took copious notes last month when the committee was talking, and then worked with all the different groups, police, and Jessica's shop to pull all this together. So thank you to Reagan for doing that. And then if there's this is a living document. So if you'd like more information, less information, different information, let us know. We'll continue to update this. But I hope this is, kind of, hope we got a good solid 90% on this one, and obviously we'll continue to tweak it. If it's not a 90%, tell me that offline, blame me, and then I'll Reagan did the really good work to get us here. But like I said, this is a living document. If it's not what we need or it needs to adapt, we'll continue to adapt it in the coming months.
No, this is great. Thank you. And thank you, Reagan, for helping put this together. As you mentioned, Jason, it is a living document. I'm looking forward to seeing how Chief Oates kind of improves it from his side as he kind of settles in and takes the reins there. But this is exactly what I was hoping for with this resolution, is just to continue to bring it forward so that our residents and the public can see the things that we're doing to try to improve public safety in our community. It's obviously an important issue to so many. And I know there's a lot of work being done. Sometimes that's not always, the story isn't always told in a way that gets to them. And so I hope to continue to use this forum as an opportunity to share that information. So I appreciate it and appreciate all the work that you all put into it. Next up, 4B, firework update. Looks like it is Commander Stephen Wright.
Good morning. If I can share my screen, I will start my presentation. Does that work for everyone?
I can see it. It's still in the full. Yeah.
Oh, the not presentation mode.
Yeah.
Hey, Commander Wright, I'll backseat drive for you. Up on the very top where it says autosave, come over about 4 or 5 tabs and you see the little thing that looks like a screen with the play button. If you click that, I think that'll take you to presentation mode.
Looks like the
Coming a little. Over 2 more to the right. 1 more. Oh, there you go. You're good. We lost you, Commander Wright. You're muted.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Stephen Wright, Commander with Aurora Fire Rescue. And this presentation is to inform this committee about the fireworks approach for 2022. What that basically means is the information involved with this is basically we have a city ordinance, fire ban that impacts that, and then a enforcement operation that needs to go with that as well. So back in February, the fire department met with Aurora Police as well as dispatch regularly, at least once a month, to strategize how we would engage the Independence holiday season. That involves a City of Aurora sponsored event, and it involves being an asset to the business community so they know how to manage the stipulations that come from the city regarding setting up their tents and selling their product. So the impetus of it is the city ordinance, and basically what that is it cuts out a period of time, June 15th through July 4th, where depending on the fire ban status, permissible fireworks will be allowed to be used and sold. So the city operates under the International Fire Code, which gives the fire department the authority to manage life safety issues. And then this ordinance carves out a permissible firework time period. So the fire code generally says that the possession, manufacture, handling, and use of fireworks are prohibited, but the ordinance then allows for some of that depending on the fire code. So it has exceptions, and those exceptions in the ordinance are that time period I talked about, June 15th, so yesterday, through July 4th. And then if you see at the bottom of this slide, an important exception, it explains that the fire ban status will impact that. So I'm going to discuss kind of the method through the fire ban status. But basically, to put it simply, a fire ban equates to disallowing the use and sale of fireworks. So how we go into deciding the fire ban level is we take 3 guiding metrics: fuel, moisture content, energy release. And there's actually 2 fuel moisture metrics and 1 energy release of fuel metric. All 3 of those, if they meet the thresholds, would institute the raising of a fire ban. So as of yesterday, we had 1 of the 3 meeting that threshold. So we will not be instituting a fire ban that would disallow fireworks. The metrics we get just for information comes from the University of Colorado researchers and scientists. And there are weather stations throughout the state, and we take fuel moisture readings per 100 feet in the ground, fuel moisture readings per 1,000 feet, and then the energy release of that fuel. So these are all percentages. So basically, if the moisture is low, if it's under 12%, or if the energy release is high, if it's over 70%, then we have cause for concern. And as you can see, we have 1 of those metrics. Another thing we take into account is what our neighbors are doing. So here's an update on the metro area. Stage 1 is the baseline stage of a fire ban. In this city, that basically means the only thing not allowed are fireworks, except per the ordinance. So the fire ban stages, as they go higher, they get more strict. There is no statewide burn ban. If you can remember from a couple years ago, that was a huge impact on municipalities because the governor basically determined how the fire ban would be. And then we also use the United States Drought Monitor to see what specific drought conditions Aurora is in. So right now we're at a D0 with D4 being very high. So the weather, climate, and conditions are conducive to not be initiating a fire ban. This talks about the stage 1, which basically just refers to recreational fireworks. Stage 2 gets more into fire pits in people's backyards and model rockets and other more specific outdoor smoking in city parks and open spaces. That gets raised. That's the higher level. Every time we raise a ban, it continues on the previous conditions of the first level and adds more. All the way up to stage 3, which has more of an impact on commercial and businesses. That means even things that might be allowed through a city permit will not be allowed, such as commercial fireworks shows, outdoor cooking, things like that. So you've got the ordinance and you've got the fire ban status, and then we go into the holiday season having to manage our resources for these things that come up that you see on your screen. Complaints and responses specifically to fireworks increase. So comparing our last couple of years, which is what we use to kind of drive us the continuing year so we know how to respond. There is an online form the citizens can fill out specifically for fireworks. There is a phone line specifically for fireworks complaints. So 2020 to 2021, you see that decrease. I attribute that honestly to community engagement and just educating the citizens on the ordinance and the fire ban. You are seeing an increase in summons, and I'll get into what it takes to file a summons in a fireworks situation. Those have increased because also through education of the citizens, I think we've gotten the word out that what it takes to actually file a summons. So last year, as an example, we increased patrols in each police district. So we had a fire department member and a police member, and they patrol a specific police district specifically for fireworks complaints, July 3, 4, and 5. Starting June 15th, when we start getting the online form complaints, the fire group does continue to follow up on those throughout the summer, throughout July, August. As you saw on the previous slide, 1 year we had 1,500 online complaints. We do follow up on all those. And you see that we confiscated a couple £100 last summer. So the process on the right, you see a specific example of a heat map for a period of time last year where the complaints were coming from. And this is what the patrols use to help guide our resources. The dispatch center does enact a dedicated non-emergent line specifically for fireworks complaints. Access Aurora provides a online form specifically for. You can always call 911 in the case of emergency. There's the possible punishment of a fireworks misdemeanor. And then that last bullet point kind of describes what it takes. We do need a specific witness who fills out a witness statement and is willing to tell us the illegal fireworks behavior that are happening. So that's a bit of a process. There are, I can give an example, there are municipalities in the nation that have made fireworks tickets a lot less involved, where you can just have whatever property it's occurring on, that address owner gets a ticket. Right now, being that it's a misdemeanor in the city of Aurora, it does take a witness statement. Our neighbors, if you want a comparable to what other municipalities in the metro area, everyone obviously has to deal with this Independence holiday season and fireworks. So you can see what other municipalities have done. Denver does do virtually our exact same enforcement style with the up staff and teaming up police and fire on specific days around the 4th. Parker, what they say is illegal there is exactly how we say it: fireworks that explode or leave the ground. And our community engagement team gets that message out. And then you have all the way down to Arvada, who bans even sparklers. Everything is illegal. So moving forward through this summer, the group that'll be working on this, either 6 fire inspectors, 3 fire investigators, who are on the Aurora Fire Department in the Inspections and Investigations Division. Along with that leadership team, the deputy chief, the commander, and the lieutenant, marry up with Aurora Police during that time frame and do the extra patrols specifically for fireworks complaints. We basically stick to 1 to each police district, and then on the 4th we actually add 2 per district. And I will say the focus on these, we call them enforcement, if you will, but really the focus is education. Is the focus to the citizens, education on what's permissible, what's not, and what the ordinance states. We do confiscate anything illegal we find, and then we summons will be issued if necessary. Well, that was a miss hit. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Laptop. Okay, back to where I was. So then more globally, operationally, the fire department does staff more brush trucks during red flag days. Red flag day is another metric. The fire ban looks at a global view of weather conditions long term. A red flag day is a specific day that might be a concern based off of wind. So we do operationally staff more brush trucks during red flag days. We do have wildland specialty teams assigned to Station 8 and 13 that are specific to wildland fires. On the 4th, brush trucks will be upstaffed to help serve the community. And then the 4th of July Spectacular that the city's sponsoring, we will have an engine at the launch site and a rescue and an ambulance at the event to help provide a safe event. like I said, the real priority of this is educating the community, and that's where our community engagement team comes in. They are constantly messaging through social, but also I put a notification in the water bill on specifically what's going on, and a public service announcement on Aurora TV. The fire ban status, it has a lot of influence. Some years it doesn't allow it, some years it will, like this year, and that drives the messaging. Moving forward, the next steps, part of it is this presentation to this council committee to make you aware of how the Independence holiday season will look in this city. We have presented to Aurora's key community response team. We regularly present to the Business Advisory Board, and this is a good example of how that this can affect the business community, so we want their perspective and keep them informed. We already have vendors, because 15th was the date for the ordinance, so we already have vendors that have put in temporary use permits. So we will go inspect not only the safety of those tents, but also ensuring that the product they sell is permissible in the city. I talked to you about how we're going to up staff for patrols, and then we plan on providing a safe July 4th spectacular event for the community. Thank you for the time. Sorry for the distraction in my presentation. I hope it was informative, and I am here to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I just have one quick question for you, and it's, you talked about the 3 different criteria that's used to determine whether or not you go forward with the full-fledged ban. How often do you measure those criteria, and how quickly can it go from we're good to uh-oh?
Yeah, good question. We measure every week, every Friday.
Okay.
Is when we get, and part of that measurement is a projection for the next week as best guess. I would say, to specifically answer that question, it probably about a month is how we see it evolve, where you can kind of see it trending towards a possible change. And then, but then wasn't it maybe a few weeks ago we had that odd snowstorm after Mother's Day that really impacted it. So something like that happens, it can change everything. But I can tell you, for whatever it's worth, that these same metrics are looking stable for the next 3 weeks. And even if we continue on this hot kind of weather we've had.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, if not, thank you for the presentation. We'll go on to item 4C, which is the acoustic gunshot detection system.
Good morning, Captain Chad Cernich with Aurora Police Special Operations. I do have a PowerPoint if I can get the share permissions activated. Thank you. Are you seeing that?
Yes, sir. It's not in presentation mode, so we can see pieces of it.
Okay, I'm sorry. How do we get to the presentation mode again?
2 options. So up on the top left, where it says autosave, if you come over about 4 or 5 icons, you'll see the little thing that looks like a, movie screen with a little play button on it. If you hit that, or if you come.
Okay. Right. Okay, so ShotSpotter is acoustic technology that incorporates audio sensors to detect, locate, and alert police of gunfire incidents in real time. Currently in use by over 120 agencies nationwide, including most notably Denver, NYPD, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Las Vegas, many others. I believe Chief Oates has experience with it when he was consulting in Baltimore as well. It notifies police of gunshot crimes in progress in real time with data delivered directly to dispatch centers and can be pushed to MDCs and patrol cars and even officers' smartphones. There's a advertised return time of less than 60 seconds from ShotSpotter from the actual time a gun discharge event is received by their system through a digital alert, which includes a precise location of the event on a map that is delivered to the police agency. What it consists of and how it works is 15 to 20 wireless sensors per square mile that are mounted on existing infrastructure to include buildings, light poles, and cell towers. They're 30 feet high above the ground. They are designed to capture only loud, impulsive sounds that may be gunfire. The data is then first digitally filtered by its system through a computer program, and it is then sent to a review center, one of which is in California. I'm not sure where the other one is, but it's out of state. And that is then reviewed by human acoustic experts. They first review the sound wave pattern, which is on a digital readout, and to determine if it appears to be consistent with a impulsive gunshot event. They will then listen to the short snippet of audio that is sent with that data to determine whether, again, it matches a consistency with gunfire versus fireworks or that type of thing. If it is not verified as gunfire, then they don't report it to the police department. They will just delete that. If it is, then they send it directly to our dispatch center and the other methods of communication. So in order for it to work, and in order for a alert to be sent to the review center, 3 separate sensors must be triggered by the sound to determine that it's gunfire and triangulate the location. If it doesn't hit 3 sensors, it's not triggered, the alert's not sent. Each sensor covers about a 25-meter radius. And then it provides a recording of the gunfire event, as I mentioned earlier, and it includes 1 second prior to the event and then 1 second after. And it's used for verification purposes. The accuracy of the system, there was a study done this year by Edgeworth Analytics, reviewed that the system and found that it was 97.82% accurate in detecting gunfire events for 2021. It either missed gunfire events or falsely reported another sound as gunfire only 2.18% of the time. In 2021, the ShotSpotter system returned false readings where it said there was gunfire when no gunfire actually occurred, only 0.36% of that time. And then that's a decrease from the prior year from 0.41%. So its system, the algorithms are learning as it goes along, and the system is becoming more accurate. So you can see that the false alarms are very infrequent. It's more common that they may miss a gunfire event, but again, that's only less than 2% of the time. As far as privacy concerns from the community, the policing project of the New York University Law School conducted an independent audit in 2019. They published a report. Their conclusion was that there's a very low risk of human voice surveillance from the system. It was also reviewed by the Oakland Privacy Advisory Commission, and that was in 2019. They have one of the most stringent local surveillance ordinances in the country, and they unanimously approved the continued use of ShotSpotter in their community. And also in 2020, ShotSpotter was reviewed by San Francisco Privacy Advisory Board and Surveillance Board and passed their review as well. So there's no ability for the system to actively listen to continuously or live stream audio from the sensor. So what it does is if it misses a gunfire incident, the police can contact the company to listen to the audio recording and ask them to review it. And again, they don't allow the police to do that. It is only their employees with proper credentials that access that audio to search it. The search on the actual audio components of the system only record information for a 30-hour time period to allow us to go back and recover data from a missed gunfire event. And then it's deleted off of their system. So typically we would have that information probably within a 24-hour time period if we have a victim show up that reports a shooting that wasn't captured by the ShotSpotter system. The ShotSpotter corporation requires the police agencies to provide evidence that a shooting occurred in the form of a report or case number with a victim witness or recovered shell casings at a scene before they will release that information. The searching is done by their firm and by their experts. They look over the acoustic sound wave data first before they listen to any audio, and they will look for the event in whatever time range in that 30-hour period. And if they find that on their system, then they will review that with the audio data. So the anecdotal data from Denver PD, their successes have been, they've been using ShotSpotter since 2015. During that time period, their gun arrests are up 296% through 2020. And they attribute that directly to ShotSpotter. In 2019, Denver PD received 2,500 ShotSpotter alerts. They made 99 arrests, seized 81 guns. In 2020, they seized over 100 guns. In 2021, they had 94 arrests and 120 firearm recoveries. And again, they attribute the majority of that to ShotSpotter. Going back through 2018, they attribute ShotSpotter resulting in 337 arrests and 322 firearm recoveries. So out of that 3-year time period, 2018 to 2021, ShotSpotter reported 11,234 gunshots in Denver. 85% of those, Denver PD had no correlating 911 call. This is consistent with data that's published by ShotSpotter indicating that approximately 80% of gunfire goes unreported. Urban Institute study also found Denver PD officers arrived on scene 66% faster to ShotSpotter alerts than to calls of shots fired received versus via 911. And again, this is because the location can be immediately triangulated and pinpointed. It can be sent directly to the officers. There's no need for people to have to call dispatch and then have dispatch go through their line of questioning, which could take several minutes. Then the call could pen for several minutes, depending on what else is going on the radio traffic. So it's a much faster response. And anecdotally, with the prior information regarding the lack of reporting of gunshots, one of our recent homicides on Archer Place, I believe it was at an apartment complex. We had 2 victims. The actual homicide, the first report came in about 5 a.m. From a citizen who found the people lying in the parking lot. When detectives interviewed residents of the apartment complex, they learned that residents had heard gunfire up to several hours prior to that. So there is anecdotal data that supports that statistic. And the quicker we can get to the scene, obviously, we have a better chance of not only apprehending suspects, but potentially saving lives by applying first aid immediately to victims. Denver PD recently renewed their ShotSpotter contract through 2026. They spent $4.7 million for 14 square miles of coverage. They have the potential to expand that based on their gun violence data. Just as a comparison, how they've expanded, they spent $815,000 in 2019, and they had 7 areas of ShotSpotter coverage. As far as the need in Aurora, as you can see, going back 3 years, our number of reported gunfire incidents are consistently increasing. They're nearly double what they were in 2019 through 2020. You can also see that the actual number of persons shot is dramatically increasing throughout the years. And that is why we are asking council to consider purchasing this valuable technology for our police department that will make us more effective in our crime fighting efforts. If we look back 1 year, this is the locations where we've had reported gunfire incidents in Aurora, May through April, 2021 through 2022. The larger dots indicate areas where we've had more than one reported shooting or shots fired event. Those larger dots represent anywhere from 9 to 27 incidents at particular locations. So as you can see on this map, the problem is pretty much citywide. If we narrow it down as far as trying to determine where we would locate and choose to place these gunshot detection systems, I'm sorry. If we look at the 3-year period, I apologize. The 3-year period that narrows it down quite a bit. There's really 3 to 4 areas where we could focus our efforts on, where you see consistently where we have multiple shooting locations on each of the 3-year, each year during the 3-year period. And this is the material that was used in the presentation preparation. And any questions?
Yeah, thanks for that presentation. I know this is Councilmember Sundberg wasn't able to join today. This is a topic that he's brought up, and I know just given the growth that you show there and the number of shootings throughout our city, this is a concern. And so I guess I have a couple of questions. One, and maybe this is for you or Jason or whoever on the cost. I looked at the Denver, the amount that they're spending in a fairly small geographic area. Aurora's big, and unfortunately, while the 3-year averages and even those dots kind of show you where they have been, the fact of the matter is we're starting to hear about shootings all over the city. And we're a much bigger city geographically. So just from a cost perspective, have we dug into this yet?
Yeah, we've gotten quotes in the past. I think it is, since it is a geographic area, but I think typically what we've seen is about $1 million for three square miles of coverage, which is sort of consistent with the Denver numbers. Since they've expanded, I think they've picked up a little bit of efficiencies against that. But if I remember the numbers correctly, I think typically we see about $1 million for a 3 square mile area. So, and then the other one I'll do is I'll ask Chief Oates, as Captain Cernich noted, Chief Oates does have some experience with this, and so I'll let him kind of talk a little bit about his experience and thoughts.
And Jason, my understanding is they now sell it as a subscription, right? So it's a certain cost per year, and it's the bottom line, council member, is ShotSpotter is very expensive. It properly used, it's very effective. Now, in my consulting work in the last 3 years, I was immersed in both St. Louis City and Baltimore. Baltimore uses it very effectively. They've spent a fortune on it, and they get to scenes of shootings, of which they have a lot in Baltimore, very, very quickly. So it's a tremendous aid to Baltimore PD. St. Louis, by contrast, uses it very poorly, and it's basically ineffective. So it's really got to be integrated with police operations in a smart way, and there has to be the capacity for a quick response. The challenge for ShotSpotter is it's extremely expensive. There's a lot of value in spending that money as an alternative on cameras and license plate readers. In a city like ours, you know, I would think that before we took the plunge with ShotSpotter, we would want to look at areas of the city and make a determination as to whether or not we'd rather have more cameras and license plate readers versus ShotSpotter. We would have to do some sort of analysis. I've seen it work really well, but it's really expensive.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chief Oates. That's kind of the research I had done was exactly that. It's an expensive tool, and I think that it would be beneficial for this committee before we move anything forward to do that analysis of the camera and license readers. I think that the goal should be, what does effective look like? Are we saving lives? Are we preventing more crime from happening? Are we able to respond quicker? All of the things that we'd want to be able to do, and then what's the most cost-effective tool to do that. And so I think that having some sort of a presentation and a deep dive into an alternative option would be worthwhile.
Councilmember Zvonek.
Yep, go ahead.
Can I just ask a question real quick? I'm sure there's a method, but if it could be explained to me, how how would like gunshots from controlled environments affect this data? I mean, we have Buckley Space Force Base, we have multiple outdoor gun ranges, indoor gun ranges. You know, ShotSpotter may even pick that up. Can it be explained to me how that could possibly affect our data on with ShotSpotter?
So typically, it's not going to pick up interior gunshot. The sensor would have to be very close to the location to where that's occurring. We typically wouldn't probably locate it, like for instance, near our police range, for that very reason. But that's why we would use the data on where we are getting the actual criminal gunshots and place them there. So it's not as when you look at the map for the whole city regarding where the gunshots are occurring, the ShotSpotter wouldn't detect that. So as mentioned previously, it has to be focused in a rather small area of several square miles, and that we would have to determine whether or not there was anything that would interfere with that or cause any false readings, and most likely wouldn't locate it there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I guess I'll just make one last comment before we move on, and that's really for you, Chief Oates, and your team, is that whatever technology is needed to help the department be more effective and efficient and helping to prevent crime in our city. Those are the types of things we wanted to learn about in this committee so we can bring forward. And if you think there's other options out there that are more cost effective and can be as efficient and effective as a ShotSpot, we'd love to hear about them.
Okay, I guess what we could do is we could look at the most concentrated areas of gunfire recently and evaluate whether or not some quadrant would be suitable for ShotSpotter versus more of a layering of cameras and license plate readers, and get back to you. So we'll have to do some sort of evaluation for you. If we were to go down this route with ShotSpotter, probably the smart way to do it would be to start small and tight. I don't know if that's economically viable for ShotSpotter to only do a limited area of a city. So that's something we would have to discuss with them as well. So, but we can do some analysis for you and get back on this topic.
Great, thank you.
Chief, this is Mark Hildebrand. One of the good things about building out a camera system, especially a mesh camera system, is ShotSpotter does have the ability to tie into those cameras, and that increases the effectiveness of ShotSpotter. So I think that's why building out a camera system may be an initial step to make ShotSpotter more effective, because when those shots go off, if you have increased coverage with those cameras will actually turn and fixate where those shots came from and have the potential of picking up a vehicle, leaving that area or something along those lines. So ShotSpotter relies on a lot of other things in order to increase its effectiveness.
Great, thanks for that. Anything else on this item? Otherwise, we will go on to where we're going to actually skip item 4D. There was a scheduling issue with our presenter, or one of our presenters on that item. So we would skip 4D and move to item 4E. And I will start with 4E. And 4E and 4F, we'll take them separately, but they're together, an ordinance and a resolution that we're bringing forward as a package to address motor vehicle theft. And I'll tee it up, and then I want to hand it over to Pete Schulte to get into the specifics of the ordinance in terms of what it does. But the reason for both the ordinance and the resolution is it's really a response to our residents and the growing concern with motor vehicle theft throughout our city. Colorado has seen a spike over the last couple of years between 2019 and 2021 of 86% increase in motor vehicle theft, which has put the state in the top spot in terms of per capita auto theft. And during that same period of time, from 2019 to 2021, the city of Aurora has seen a 236% increase in motor vehicle theft. It's something that I know that I hear a lot about from our residents. You don't have to do much scrolling through Nextdoor and other community forums to hear that they're deeply concerned about this. And unfortunately, what we've seen from our state lawmakers over the course of the past 6 or 7 years is a systematic effort to lower the penalties for motor vehicle theft. And as a result, we've seen a corresponding increase in theft across the state. So what my hope is with this ordinance and then the corresponding resolution is really to put Aurora in a position to be tough on motor vehicle theft, to crack down on it, to see these numbers start to go in a different direction. Because even as we looked into the first 5 months of this year through May, we're already up 25% year to date. And I know Chief Oates, you're going to talk about the need to look in 4 months or in 4-week increments as opposed to year to date. But suffice it to say, these numbers and the trends that we're seeing year to date are not encouraging. And so my hope is that these tougher penalties for motor vehicle theft, as well as theft of essential car parts, it's another issue that's plagued our state. Thefts of catalytic converters, that's an essential part. So in this ordinance, it addresses essential car part theft. And the final piece of the ordinance that deals with is failure to appear, people who are not showing up for their court date at the time when they have the victims, and in many cases, a witness showing up. So with that, I want to hand it over to Pete to dive into some of the specifics of the ordinance.
Thank you, Chair Zvonek. Good morning, members of the committee and other colleagues on the call. So looking at the ordinance specifically, and everybody can hear me, right? Just want to make sure. Okay,
Yes, sir.
perfect. The first section, obviously, Chair Zvonek just went through the background and why this has been identified as an issue. So under section 1, generally what our office has recommended is if we continue to update the city code to start to build in some of these mandatory minimum sentences, we're going to do it under the general penalty. Under section 1-13 under general penalty, that is, as part as any fine or penalty is defined, there is a sentence of up to 1 year and up to a $2,650 fine. So if you look at section 1, it adds section J, which then starts the list of different areas of the code that we will add if council supports to do this on other offenses, including in addition to these, the minimum offenses. So looking at section J1, which is section 94-75 of motor vehicle theft, it states that a mandatory minimum jail sentence of 60 days shall be imposed. And what it does is it requires the court to not set aside or suspend this minimum sentence. And then it says the first 3 days to be served at our detention facility, and the remaining days to be served at the applicable county jail in the county where the offense occurred. And the reason for that is obviously we, being a holding facility, not a jail. I know there's other discussions about making it into a jail, but we're not there yet. Really, for the jail purposes, we've been told they're one of our clients that 3 days is really all they can handle. So I know that Councilmember Zvonek has talked to the sheriffs of Arapahoe and Adams County about the need to make sure that if we do sentence, or when our judges do sentence individuals to jail, that they serve their sentence at the county jail. But I want to just reiterate and stress that is outside of the city's control. The sheriff sets for how many days credit somebody does for every day that they do. So it would be outside of our control. But the minimum sentence on a first-time offense for motor vehicle theft would be 60 days. And then on a repeat offender, it doesn't have to be just in the city of Aurora. If it's any other motor vehicle theft related, whether in Colorado state law or laws of another state, there would be a mandatory minimum jail sentence of 120 days. And we talk about not setting aside or suspending. Obviously, the court does, before this, if this ordinance does not go into effect, they have the ability to sentence somebody to probation. They would sentence them up to a year in jail and then suspend that sentence for a period of months, putting them on probation. And as long as they complete the probation, they wouldn't have to serve the jail sentence. This mandatory minimum sentence ordinance would not allow the court to do that. And then again, continuing on to section 1, the failure to appear. When we do issue failure to appear charges, there will be a minimum jail sentence of 10 days for the defendant who did not appear. And this is helpful that if we do have the situation in court where, we have several trial settings for whatever reason, we can't go to trial, but one of the defendants failed to appear and they do get charged with FTA. Really, the proof of that particular offense only is probably the bailiff in the courtroom where they didn't show up versus having to bring the victim of the motor vehicle theft. So it goes towards Councilmember Zvonek's purpose of saying, hey, you know what, if you're going to do these type of crimes in the city of Aurora, you're going to show up to court or you're going to be penalized for it. So that's hopefully the goal of that section. Subsection 2, it just part of housekeeping. It just says unless otherwise provided in ordinance or that subsection J that we added. It talks about the consequences. And then section 3 is what's amending 94-74, our theft statute in the city code. The first thing you'll see, you'll probably have a question about is why are we changing anything of value, having a value of less than, it was originally $2,000, now to $1,000. That is to conform to state statute. Colorado state statute has determined that theft, as it's written in the state code, is a matter of statewide concern, and they limited the jurisdiction under the value of $1,000 or less than $1,000, so $999.99 or less. Now that doesn't mean something more expensive than that couldn't be prosecuted in the municipal court, but we would just have to plead it or allege it as being under $1,000. And what we did is, if we scroll down to page 127 of your packet, it goes, we added the component of major component of a motor vehicle. So what the legislature did this year is they made stealing any major component of a motor vehicle a petty offense. So what this does is it adds, and they added some language for catalytic converters under a chop shop statute, where if you're running a chop shop, there's different levels of the amount of information or amount of value of the items that were taken, but they didn't have anything for a major component. So what this ordinance does is it adds really the components that are in state statute, or what a major component of a motor vehicle is, into our city code, and subjects the offenders to up to a year in jail and up to that $2,650 fine. And you can see under E1P, it says a catalytic converter, but it also includes the rest of a major component of our motor vehicle. And other than that, there is in section 4, that's just severability, that for some reason any of this ordinance is determined to be unenforceable, then it's removed, but the rest of it stays in effect. Section 5 will have a sunset provision that we can review this. We, Councilmember Zvonek, I talked about doing a 2-year process where we can review, and then whether or not to continue at that point, and the rest of it is required by our code. With that is the ordinance. I can wait, Councilmember Zvonek, if you want me to wait on the resolution until the next one, we can do that.
Yeah, great. Any questions, comments on?
Councilmember Zvonek.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. I have a question for the Public Defender's Office and also the presiding judge if they're on the call. What do you expect the impact of this ordinance, should it pass, would be on your office?
Hi, this is Doug Wilson. Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and other members of the committee. There is going to be an impact on the Public Defender's Office, and I don't want to speak for the City Attorney's Office and Judge Day, but there's going to be an impact on them as well. I'm pretty sure. And let me talk to you a little bit about that fiscal impact that I think is going to occur. First, right now, the City Attorney's Office has the ability to waive jail time. And if they waive jail time, an indigent person doesn't get counsel. So this will obviously eliminate the ability for the city attorney to waive that jail time. Second, I think the Aurora Police Department are going to file more charges, obviously, in municipal court than in state court, because I was actually at a conference earlier this week from PDs across the country, and it looks like we may be the first minimum mandatory municipal ordinance in the country. There are some that have minimum mandatories for repeat offenders, like Mr. Schulte talked about. You have the 120 days, but what's going to happen is, because there's no minimum mandatories in county court and there's concurrent jurisdiction, I think that we're going to see more motor vehicle theft. So that's going to increase our workload. I assume the city attorneys in the courts and courts administration as well. And we are certainly going to have more jury trials. This puts us in a position of not being able to negotiate a plea that would involve a minimum mandatory. Rare exceptions, but most of the time, those cases are going to have to be tried because of it's kind of an ethical issue for us to plead somebody out to a sentence that we know is going to be imposed. Again, there are other extenuating circumstances. Somebody has like 5 motor vehicle theft cases and the disposition is plead to 1 and get 60. That's probably going to happen. But first time offenders or other folks, I just think you're going to drive up the number of jury trials that occur over here. And then last, just a quick, 2 quick things. One, Pete, I think you talk about 365 or a year. The state statute limits the municipal court time to 364, not a year. I know what the ordinance says, and that probably needs to be tweaked because it talks both in the ordinance and the resolution about up to a year or 365, but that can't be imposed. And it's only important, I think it's important to have the number accurate in your ordinance because of the immigration consequences. And that's the reason I believe it was changed from a year to 364 by the state. And then the only other thing I would point out, which is not part of your question, or Councilmember Mercano, but I'm concerned about the FTA and the mandatory time because there's no mens rea attached. And the way it's written right now, it's going to apply to police officers, it's going to apply to victims, it's going to apply to witnesses and defendants. And there may be a reason that somebody didn't get to court, everything from in custody to in hospital. So without any kind of mens rea attached, culpable state, and just an automatic 10 days, that's going to drive a workload increase for us because we're obviously going to be representing that person because now it's a jailable offense, an automatic jailable offense. So we're going to see an increase in FTAs. I'm not sure it's constitutional without a mens rea attached. And we're going to see an increase as a result of, I think, more filings. So that's my opinion. And as I said, I'm not speaking for anyone else, but I can't imagine this isn't going to impact everyone else over here as well.
Okay. I have a follow-up, Councilmember Zvonek, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And this is for the public defenders, for Chief Oates, for Pete, whoever wants to try to answer this. Every single thing that I have read about mandatory minimums shows that they do not work. They end up spending a tremendous amount of public resources to incarcerate and prosecute these folks, and you still have crime. And when these folks get out, a lot of them recidivate. Yeah, even though they face another mandatory minimum or an even steeper sentence after the fact. So is there something we're missing here?
Well, I'm always willing to jump into the pool. So no, I don't think there's anything you're missing. I mean, having come from the state, and I know Councilmember Zvonek's not happy with the state, and I'm not happy with the state right now either. Now that I'm in the city, so now I'm on a different team, right? So, but going all the way back to when minimum mandatory started, what we actually saw was a significant increase in people losing their right to trial, which is kind of a fundamental criminal justice system or issue going back to the start of the U.S. Constitution. And it did not deter. I know that in the 1, 2, 3, the fourth whereas, we were talking about deterrence. Having fought the death penalty for a long time, and that argument was made that the ultimate type of offense that it would deter. In fact, the evidence did not support general deterrence. There's 2 types of deterrence. You have specific deterrence. Yes, the guy's locked up, he's not going to steal another car. And then there's general deterrence that, oh, if you lock someone up, the next guy's not going to steal a car. And that's the theory behind minimum mandatories, or part of the theory. And there really isn't any data to support the general deterrence theory as it relates to minimum mandatories, from what I've read.
Councilmember Mercano, I'll jump in too. And I do know before my time, we did have sentences that the court would impose on motor vehicle thefts that included jail time. And my understanding was it was effective when jail time was part of the sentence to drive down motor vehicle theft inside the city of Aurora. And I know I won't speak for Chair Zvonek, but I do know that is part of the goal of this. And I don't disagree with what a lot Doug just said, but something's got to give, whether it's with the judges, whether it's with, with the jails, whatever it is. I think that, the purpose of the legislation is to make it known. Don't be stealing cars in the city of Aurora, and whatever we can do to do that. But and again, that was one of the things that we did talk about with Chair Zvonek, and that was one of the reasons why we did put the sunset provision in it, is to evaluate how is it working, and whether that could be a year, 2 years. And we had talked about 2 years to really find the impact. But I agree that data would be helpful if it's dropping the amount of theft of cars in the city of Aurora. But that's kind of the idea, is we got to try something. That's the gist of it, if that's correct, Chair Zvonek.
Yeah, that's right. And the other, sorry, Chief Oates, just real quick. And the other things that what we've seen very clearly is that the state legislature has made so many more permissible laws around all sorts of criminal offenses. And in every instance, we've seen more crime. Colorado is now leading the nation in motor vehicle theft. We're leading the nation in robbery. We're number 2 in fentanyl deaths. Our legislature has continually decriminalized everything to the point to where they're decriminalizing crime, and we've seen more crime. And the result of this is it's just not statistics. These are our residents who are becoming victims. And so we owe it as a local elected leaders, we should do everything in our power to keep our residents safe. And I believe that having the toughest laws on motor vehicle theft will be a deterrence. Now, if the data doesn't bear that out, that's why, exactly to Pete's point, we're going to have the sunset date in there, but we'll be able to see. Time will tell if us being the first, and I don't mind leading the pack when it comes to keeping our community safe. I'm happy to know that we're the first, because we'll become a model. Because I guarantee that when people stop stealing cars in Aurora, they're going to go elsewhere, and other cities are going to follow suit. Chief Oates?
Mr. Chair, to the extent it's helpful, my recollection is that when I arrived here in late '05, beginning in '06, we had an understanding with the judges in the court, not mandatory sentences, but we had an understanding that there would be sentences of jail time for first, second, and third, progressively more serious sentences for first, second, and third offenses. So this, in fact, was something that we did in my earlier tenure here, and it was effective. We had a very significant reduction in auto theft between '06 and when I left in '14. I think the issue of the impact on the courts of mandatory sentences is a real one, and I think Mr. Wilson and Ms. Heckman and the judge are much better capable of explaining that to you in your policy decision you have to make. But in fact, there was a period in time when we were sentencing folks progressively to more serious sentences. I can't recall, maybe Julie can. I seem to recall it was something like 30 days for the first offense and 90 days for the second. And it had an impact when I was here in my earlier stint from '06 to '14.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Zvonek, could you have a few more questions?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So I guess this is probably more for Doug and Pete. How does this impact minors? Because I know that a lot of, if not most of the MVTs involve minors. So how would that impact them?
I mean, I'll jump into that. We don't have, it won't be dealing with minors. We don't have a juvenile court. Everything goes to the county on those, and they will not be subject to minimum mandatory sentences. So it will not be affected.
Okay. And I guess the last one's really more of a comment, in response to what Councilmember Zvonek said. Motor vehicle thefts and catalytic converter thefts are a national problem. And yes, we are leading the pack, if not just up at the top of the pack, unfortunately, in Colorado and I believe New Mexico. But I just, caution making broad generalizations, because we don't control national legislation, and this is happening in other states that may or may not have done things like we've done in Colorado. But what I can tell you is that we're one of the more expensive states in the nation to live in anymore. The Denver Metro, I think, led the nation in gentrification and in cost of living increases for the last couple of years, or at least was in the top of the pack there. So, I understand some folks' reaction is just to look more into the punitive sense and react harder than actually being proactive. I still maintain that I think we might be better suited trying to address some of the root causes of this antisocial behavior in our community, while also holding folks accountable. I'm not against doing that either. But my concern is that we're going to be burning a lot of public resources with this ordinance as it stands, with mandatory minimums, with increased trials, et cetera, where we could actually just be spending those limited resources that we have and investing in our community in proactive ways to make this kind of behavior unnecessary to begin with. Again, while also holding folks accountable who continue to violate. So just some food for thought there.
No, I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Carno. And, the difference I think with motor vehicle theft is that I do believe some people are stealing them out of necessity. But what I've heard consistently from law enforcement, including the two sheriffs, is that motor vehicle theft is often being done, and it's leading to additional crimes.
Mm-hmm.
We are allowing additional crimes, whether it's shootings, burglary, robbery, to happen in our community. And I understand that the long-term need to address some of the root causes that are increasing crime, but some of those young people who are not stealing cars and that we need to help so that they don't steal cars in the future are still not the ones who are victimizing our community. So I believe that, and we've heard from Chief Oates that in the past, and they might not have called them minimum mandatory, but there was essentially minimum mandatories in what was being sentenced based on the first, second, third offenses, and we saw a decrease. And the focus of both this ordinance and the resolution is to address the motor vehicle theft that's exploding in Aurora now. I understand that crime is up everywhere across the country, but Colorado has gone from on the bottom end to the very first, and Aurora is number one among number one. That is not a place we want to be. And so, look, my hope is that, and I understand that I believe this. Initially, there will be an increased cost, there will be increased workload, but as APD continues to make this a focus, as the word gets out that we are going to be tougher than any other city in the state of Colorado on car theft, we're not going to be dealing with as much car theft in the city of Aurora as a result of it. Now, if I'm wrong, we're going to continue to monitor this, and I'm happy to make this a part of the monthly updates in our Aurora action plan, because I believe in being data driven. I want to see, and I'm happy that Chief Oates brought up that point of looking at those 4-week trends, because we'll be able to monitor it along the way. And if along the way we're finding that we're spending a lot of resources and not seeing a difference, I would be the first to say let's do something different. But I think as of right now, what we owe to our residents is to do something to lower motor vehicle theft in our city, because it's not just that their cars are being stolen, it's additional crimes being committed. And I think that we can have a big impact on the safety of our community by passing both this ordinance and resolution. Other questions or comments on this?
Yeah, Councilmember.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, so go ahead.
No, I appreciate the explanation of your thoughts behind this effort. I guess the disagreement that I have is that I feel like we already have data points on the efficacy, or rather lack thereof, of mandatory minimums. But I do appreciate the sunset clause and that you'd be willing to rescind this if it doesn't have any effect. So I do appreciate that. And I completely agree that we need to actually elevate the voices of folks who are victims of motor vehicle theft. And I do like the resolution part of it, including a fund basically to help folks recover from being victimized. I think that might actually be a really, really good way to, frankly, just make the primary focus of a lot of this, while, again, holding folks accountable under existing law. And that was actually another question I wanted to ask. What on earth is keeping us from charging people under existing law? It's a crime already to steal a vehicle. It's a crime already to steal a catalytic converter. And what I'm hearing is that people are being basically bonded out immediately and stuff like that. Repeat offenders even, which seems completely preposterous to me. Why is that happening? And that's for
an attorney.
Yeah, that's for an attorney to answer.
Hey, wait a minute. Talk about a can of worms. Yeah. So what I will say is that is a topic of a broader discussion, right? About bonding. I think that was an overflow from what was going on with COVID. We couldn't keep people in jail. Mm-hmm. So I think, and again, I will never try to attempt to speak for Judge Day and the judges, but I think now that the jails and the detention facilities are open to fully now, that I think that will change, where they can start setting the bonds. But a lot of that is being driven, again, as Councilmember Zvonek stated, by state statute on bond reform, right? Why are we keeping people in jail? It's a monetary issue. If they can't bond out, the poor people stay in jail, where all the people that have assets can get out. So that's the balance. And I don't think we're going to solve that. I don't think we can solve it as much at the city level.
Councilmember Marcano, if it helps, When we did this the last time, it was because we weren't getting satisfaction in state court. We had repeat offenders and repeat offenders and repeat offenders. And I think the parallel to today is there.
And I'll say this to you, Councilmember Marcano. My plan is we don't have a study session until middle of July, so I plan to bring this directly to council on the 27th. Where I would be open to discussion on this is on those. I do believe we have to have a minimum mandatory for those repeat offenders. What I've heard today is on that first offense, the 60 days. I would be open to having maybe a sooner sunset day, or just I'd be happy to have some conversations about things that we can change. I don't think we're ever going to agree 100% on this, but I'm willing to work in good faith on something that that we maybe get you a little bit closer and satisfies my desire with this is to really just demonstrate to our residents that we are taking the safety of our city very seriously, recognizing that there's only so much we can do given our limitation as a municipal government. Even though we're a home rule city, we still have limitations with state laws that, in my view, have become overly permissive to the point to where we're having more victims in all sorts of different crimes, including motor vehicle theft.
Councilor?
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I'm really concerned specifically about the first-time offenders having a mandatory minimum. I think that might be an area where we could maybe come to some kind of compromise. But I will say that, and this is more of a general comment, but I do think that we can actually impact this at the local level, is that part of the issue that we're facing is while our laws may be becoming more permissive, as you put it, we're not addressing any of the underlying, the root causes at the state level, and certainly not at the local level. We can't even raise the minimum wage here, even though people ran on that and then subsequently did not do that. So we need to address these underlying economic factors. That's what I mean by proactive economic investment in our local community, help people actually thrive in our city, let alone be able to afford it anymore. And I think that's part of the reason why Colorado continues to lead the pack and why we're seeing this as a nationwide trend, because the cost of living everywhere, specifically housing, is completely out of control. And when you have people getting desperate, they do desperate things. So yeah, but in terms of this ordinance specifically, I do wish we had a study session because I'd like to have a longer discussion on it, but just for what it's worth, the first-time offenders having a mandatory minimum really doesn't sit well with me. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any objection to moving it forward? Not wait. So the plan will be to go to the June 27th council meeting. And I'll say the same thing for the next item, which is 4F, the motor vehicle theft resolution. Again, I view this as kind of a complementary package between the ordinance and the resolution. One of the things I really want to point out, and I'll let Pete talk about it a little bit more, and Councilmember Marcano talked about this, is dealing with or the creation of a crime victim fund. And where this stems from is something that I hear a lot about, in part because of the number of cars that are stolen in our city, is that people will then have their stolen car taken to an impound. And then when they go to get their stolen car out of the impound, they're asked to pay a fee. And which is ludicrous to me that they're being re-victimized. And I know that Councilmember Marcano has brought forward an idea about a city-owned impound. So what I view this fund as is a way for us to ensure that neither taxpayers nor the victim themselves have to pay to get their cars restored. So that's part of it. And then the final piece of this resolution that's kind of separate from an overall development of a strategy is looking forward. I recognize that we can't have a piecemeal approach statewide in Colorado. If we're successful, that's not good news for our neighbors to the west, right? This isn't good news for Denver if we're really successful in lowering car theft, because they're just going to go somewhere else to do it. And I recognize that we need a statewide solution. So part of the resolution directs the city manager to work with the requisite city staff to put together a proactive strategy for the 2023 General Assembly to put forward options to strengthen penalties at the state level so that local governments don't have to do the things that we're doing to keep our city safe. So Pete, if you want to fill in any blanks that I had there, and then we can open up to discussion.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. If you guys look at it's section 1 of the resolution on page 133, that's kind of the Chair Zvonek kind of went over some of those things, but just to kind of quickly go over the goals. One of the things, and I know this is what Councilmember Marcano just brought up, but they want a continual review of sentences for those convicted of motor vehicle theft and theft of major components of motor vehicles and FTAs. We talked about the enhanced prosecuting and sentencing for habitual offenders. C is interesting. It's a plan to reduce the victim and witness attendance until trial. Obviously, our system, our criminal justice system, is a system, but to bring in the use of failure to appear and I do want to reiterate that you can only be charged with failure to appear if you've been issued a summons to court under our ordinance. So it will be mostly, if not every time, limited to defendants who fail to appear for a major either a hearing or trial in their case. Because as we all know, when trials get set, there's a pretrial date set the week before. Everybody says they're ready for trial. It has happened where the Monday or Tuesday when we bring a jury in, the witnesses are there, the victim is there, the defendant fails to appear, and we have to reset the case. So what ends up happening, and I know Deputy City Attorney Julie Heckman's on the call too. I don't want to speak for her, but I know that is frustrating when we know the week before that everybody's ready for trial. Then we get ready, we bring all the witnesses down, the police witnesses, and then the defendant decides not to show, and then there really isn't a penalty for them. Maybe they have to pay some fees, but there's not an additional charge. That's kind of the focus when we talk to Councilmember Zvonek of really using the law that we already have of the failure to appear to stop that. There's the creation and inclusion of victims to access fees and restitution earlier in the process. And we talked about, I know that Councilmember Zvonek talked about that. A more robust plan for the court to ensure victims' voices are heard. Let's just go with the crime victims laws of the state statutes. The other thing is providing more resources and flexibility to Aurora police to apprehend those committing crimes. And then that to research and develop a plan. We have to do some research on whether or not under state statute, even though we are a home rule city, that we can have a funding of a city crime victim fund like the state does. And so that's, if this passes, we will, I know my office will work on trying to see if we can make that happen, because I think that is a good idea to help minimize the sting of being a victim of crime in our city. And then Section 2 is what we've talked about with the ordinance, is to review the code, consider amending to help facilitate what is being pushed through by this resolution. Then the city manager in Section 3 to take proactive measures to help the Colorado legislature understand the effect this is having on our citizens in the city of Aurora.
Thanks, Pete. So again, as I mentioned, I view these two as kind of companion resolution to address some of the gaps that are not addressed directly in the ordinance. And again, primary focus, try and improve the safety of our community, lowering motor vehicle theft. I recognize there is going to be an increased cost, but the fact of the matter is there is an enormous cost to crime. There's been studies out there that talks about the billions of dollars that it's cost the state of Colorado. Crime has a real cost to victims when they're without their car. And the fact is, with motor vehicle theft, a lot of the cars that are stolen from families who this is a big deal for them. This is
Absolutely.
Families who they don't have maybe a second vehicle. You're talking about loss insurance, with the catalytic converter, that in some instances with the value of them, I mean, it's almost totaling their car when you take it. So there is a significant cost. And so assuming this moves forward, I will insist that we're tracking the data, looking at what is our additional cost on the courts? What is the additional cost that the city is incurring? But also what is the trend? Because if we see the decline that I anticipate that we'll see, we have to remember that is a savings. It's a savings to the families in our community. And I think that to me is worth the effort that we're going to be putting in as a city. So with that, I'll open up to any questions or comments on the resolution.
Councilmember?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. So there is a team that you're going to basically form as part of this, right? To have staff kind of formulate the victims fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, I direct the city manager and the requisite city staff, our appointees who we can to do this, and we'll really, take their lead and ask them to come forward to the Public Safety Committee and make recommendations.
All right. Is that going to include the public defender's office then?
Certainly could.
Okay. I would prefer that we, include them so we have the full continuum, both the prosecution and the defense involved in that. I think we'll probably get better results that way.
Yep, that would be fine. As long as Doug's up to it. Adding work to him.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're doing a lot of work these days. So let me also, if I can continue.
Yes, sir.
Do we have evidence? The only thing that really concerns me here is the mandatory 10 for failure to appear. I understand that's extremely aggravating, having to reset trial dates. To everybody's point, I think this impacts people economically, emotionally, etc. Having to do that. But is that mandatory 10 really the best way to ensure compliance? Is there evidence that that actually works?
This goes back to stricter penalties. I mean, we compared this to speeding, and so they don't know what the speeding ticket is. I said, I guarantee if you made speeding a $10,000 ticket, you probably see less speeding. Eventually, people they take note of stiffer penalties, and that's my hope, because this is really about not just in this case, it can be the victims, but it can also be the witnesses who are involved who show up and are taking time away from work, their family, their lives in order to do this. And so we'll track it. We'll find it. We have the data that shows what the current number of people where failure to appear is currently, and we'll be able to watch that just as any other crime trend that we evaluate going forward. Is it working or not?
Yeah. I would just suggest, if we're going to have any kind of penalty for failure to appear, that it be financial rather than involve jail, just because of the inherent cost of that. I completely agree and emphasize with folks who take time off of work, have to get childcare, etc., to appear, and it's exceptionally frustrating when people don't appear. But my concern is that we're just going to make this overall situation worse by including a mandatory 10 days. And I also want to, I think, bring something back up that the public defender mentioned earlier. With as written, would this actually apply to officers and city staff as well?
Pete?
No, the way the ordinance is written is that it's people who are out on bond, right? People that they made a promise to appear, they're out on bond, they don't show up. That meets the statute for the failure to appear.
Okay.
So police officers and witnesses they're not on bond.
Okay. I thought that's what I had heard earlier, so I apologize. Doug, did I misinterpret what you said?
Oh, you didn't misinterpret. And while I appreciate what Pete's saying, my concern is the way it's written right now. If you look at B, subsection B at 50-33, there is an FTA on a subpoena. And I think it's at a minimum pretty confusing, Pete, as to whether or not that's going to apply to the subpoenas of witnesses, victims, police officers. I mean, we have a significant number of cases dismissed on the day of trial because people aren't showing up. Our clients are showing up, but the witnesses aren't showing up. So, and that's not I'm not criticizing Julie. It's just they don't come. They don't obey the subpoena, and there's not much ramification.
Do you want us to start charging victims and witnesses so your cases don't get dismissed against your clients? I mean, I can.
No, it's the way I'm reading this is a separate charge, right?
It could, yes, and yeah,
because it says regardless of the outcome in 50-33, it says regardless of the outcome of the underlying case. So I assume it's a separate case. So that means they're going to have the right to counsel. And I would just point out and Councilmember Zvonek, this isn't a this isn't a sentence because I've been convicted unless we're going to have a trial on the FTA. That's my concern. It's basically a no bond hold on somebody on a case that hasn't been resolved unless you're charging it as a separate offense. And that no bond hold isn't going to be constitutional under the Colorado or the Supreme Court. And that's why I think it's a tad bit confusing about who it applies to. And if you're giving them a jail sentence, they're entitled to counsel, and that means they're most likely going to get a trial.
Okay.
Other questions, comments?
I mean, Councilmember Zvonek, hearing what the public defender just said there, would you be open to revising some of this then? Because
I'm making
concerned
some
that we're
notes.
going to
Yep,
run
yep,
up against the constitutional issue.
I will talk to the city attorney's office about that. I made some notes on some of the points made here, and we'll make any necessary changes before we put it on the floor for our initial discussion.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Any objections to moving it forward? Okay. If not, then I think that concludes our meeting. The next date, and I'm sorry, my email got hacked, so I don't have my.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I know. Again, so I don't have the next date is July. I don't.
The 14th, sir.
14th, there we go.
Yes, sir.
July
8:30 in the morning.
We're back to normal. So July 14th, 8:30. Thank you for that. If there's no other questions, the only other thing I wanted to bring up was that we do have the Public Safety Committee, and Councilmember Jurinsky has been organizing a first responders celebration. I just want to make this known for everybody, since this is pertinent to the Public Safety Committee. On July 16th, from noon to 4 at the Aurora Municipal Center. There's information I know that's available through the city, and you can also reach out to any of us, but want to make sure that it's friends and family. Welcome everybody that wants to come and celebrate our first responders here in Aurora. So with that, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks. Take care, y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you.